This video is being presented to honor 14 individuals who stood for truth since 1765 in the area of fundamental microbiology. Indeed, if a person is either Chinese or East Indian and followed their classic Chinese medicine or Ayurvedic practitioners, then they would be in line with this information here today. The truth of microbiology begins with a foundational dynasty of eminent stature with 4 generations of Parisian French chevaliers, 3 of them shown here. It starts off with Louis Chevalier, who opened his first lens-grinding optical business in 1765. Secondary to the importance of the Chevaliers is that they are recognized for their invention of the very first camera, this one shown here, and their advancements in the area of microscope apertures. Charles, indeed, was also a physicist, which added to the structure of the Chevalier empire. But most importantly, they provided the training ground for another French scientist, Camille Naessens. Once Naessens departed from the Chevalier tutelage, to set up his own shop, he tapped into his own natural expertise, and he became one of the top 3 participants on the World's Fair stage, along with the Chevaliers and Oberhauser out of Germany. During the mid-1800s, the demand to answer the question on how wine ferments became a key issue for the French vineyards. It was Camille Naessens that took to task by producing a microscope capable of observing such tiny microorganisms. That is, the Naessens inverted compound monocular microscope. By way of this device, Professor Antoine Bechamp was able to not only identify the tiny ferments, but also discovered the microzyma as the basic fundamental element of biology born from the cell. That changed form to other larger microorganisms, such as bacteria. This process of transformation is known as pleomorphism. This particle and its pleomorphic effect is to be rediscovered at regular intervals since its first registration in 1866 by Bechamp. A few of these scientists are on this wall as well. And additionally, Antoine Bechamp found no pathogenic microorganisms in normal air. And indeed, he made the claim of the germ theory to be the greatest scientific silliness of the age. The next chronological entry here is John Gibbs. And along with his 2 brothers, Richard and George, and his wife, and several others during the mid-1800s, they had no trouble proving the ineffectiveness and dangers of vaccination in dealing with what was fabricated as smallpox during this time. When mothers were denied exemption from vaccination after the jab took an earlier child, Mrs. Gibbs was urged to form the Mothers Against Compulsory Vaccination League. Next, we have Garth Wilkinson, who was a physician, and once he was alerted to the dangers of vaccination, and by way of 18 years of study on the topic, proclaimed the jab to be a monster instead of a poisonous midge, a devourer of nations. He obviously became one of the larger opponents of what he called poison practice during this time. And many know of Florence Nightingale being the mother of modern nursing. She voiced her opposition to the germ theory notion as well when she utilized her power of observation at what was occurring during her professional career. She observed so-called diseases like typhus changing into smallpox, and by way of this and other observations stated that there is no such thing as disease, but rather a diseased condition of the body. So next, we have Montague Leverson, and he happens to be a very important figure on this wall due to the fact when he heard of Professor Bechamp's research findings, he flew back to Europe to interview him prior to the professor's death in 1908. It is by way of these notes from Leverson that we are able to better understand these original findings from 1866. And next, we have Gunther Enderlein, who was a rediscoverer of these microbiological fundamentals and their pleomorphic effect. And Royal Rife is the second scientist inventor on this wall that was able, by way of his own ingenuity, create an optical microscope to view live blood samples. That is, his universal microscope having over 5,700 parts, and his understanding of the importance of the integrity of the cell being the key issue, rather than invading microorganisms. This has been well documented. Wilhelm Reich happens to be our next rediscoverer of the fundamental particle of microbiology, and also discovered many other things that brought down the wrath of persecution from the establishment. He died in prison at age 60. And then we come to Gaston Naessens, the most important of the figures on the wall, based on the fact that he provided the optical microscope to see live blood samples at a 30,000 times magnification. But the pertinent counterpart to actually obtaining the ability to view these samples in this way is to actually have the mental capacity to appraise what is being viewed. In this case, to establish a more complete picture of this fundamental particle of all biology. His expertise produced the 16-stage somatid cycle, of which the microorganism can be launched into the 13-stage macrocycle in an attempt to restore homeostasis within the body from toxicity. Here we see the various forms of bacteria, fungi, and yeast all morphing from the original fundamental particle. And our last entry of the 14 individuals on this wall is the only living member. Her discoveries into fundamental life forms out of Queensland, Australia, have put her on the map to question the prevailing propaganda. As might be expected in keeping with the persecution of her fellow scientists who reveal truth, she keeps a low profile. So those are the 14 names on this wall of eminence, since 1765, and it may be appropriate to finish off this video with this admission from the New York Academy of Sciences for this topic, dated the 30th of October 1970. And that is, quote, "Microorganisms of various sorts have been discovered and isolated from animal and human tumors. There is, however, one specific type of highly pleomorphic microorganism that has been observed and isolated consistently by us from human to animal malignancies of every obtainable variety for the past 20 years. The microorganism has remained an unclassified mystery, due in part to its remarkable pleomorphism and its stimulation of other microorganisms." End quote. And of course, all suppressed and buried information becomes an unclassified mystery. As Gandhi stated, an error does not become truth by reason of multiplied propagation, nor does truth become error because nobody sees it. Truth stands even if there is no public support. It is self-sustained. So this concludes part 2, that is the non-existence of the germ versus terrain debate. This debate being removed by registration into the French Academy of Sciences in 1866. A paper documenting what has just been covered can be found at www.rebuildthenation.ca under the Biological Freedom tab. Thanks for listening. May peace, love, and freedom be with you.